Hello and welcome back to the workshop, and welcome back to my entry into the Great Guitar Build-Off 2021. We look like a guitar. We've got all of our electronics lined up to where they need to be. We even got the tailpiece pretty much ready to go. Just need some final sanding on that. So we need to get the back prepared and ready to go, and we need to get these frets on. Now, I need to do bracing on this, and I may be a little ambitious, but I also want to cut a control cavity out of this in this section here. Now I want to be able to save that, so I'm going to use my jeweler's saw and a very fine blade to try and cut out that perimeter nice and carefully. They may need some cleaning up with sanding, and I'm thinking that we'll surround it by veneer to give it a little bit of a separation. And then of course we'll use the magnets to hold these in place. So enough of the delay. Clock is ticking. Let's get down to some work. So I've fine-tuned a design here, as you can see in pencil, that I like. It's minimal, and in keeping with it close to the edge, that'll make it much easier to cut out. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to drill a pilot hole so that I can then put my saw blade through it so that I can make a nice fine cut. So what I'm thinking is we drill a hole right about on this curve right here. That way after I cut it out, I can then use that to file it down to a semicircle, give it a little bit of an arc so that I have a place I can put my finger that I can pull this out. So I'm thinking of doing that right at the edge here. Put it right toward the center. Now obviously, as I said, very ambitious of me. I'll need to clean up my lines here a little bit, but at least everything matches. So I figure we'll clean that up. We'll wrap some of the veneer around it, and then that will give me the nice clean look I'm looking for. Now to get some maple prepped up for some bracing. Alright, so now that we've gotten here, and I've already been using my scrap maple for all of the bracing here, I've gone ahead and I have cut 3 pieces of maple that I'm going to use for this bracing. I'm only going to use one in the center here and 2 crossbars, just to try and not clutter up too much. I'm going to end up cutting this crossbar a little short of my pocket here so that I can then glue in little tabs to put my magnetic mount for my hardware cover. I want to end up binding this because, as you know, after you cut with a saw, there is a wider gap because of the saw blade width. It's not much, so I'll only need like 1 millimeter or 2 of veneer around the edge here to make it a nice snug fit. But we'll come back to that in a minute here. What I've gone ahead and did, might not be able to catch that because it's a very slight radius, but I've gone ahead and I have trimmed down the edges to make a small radius to fit the contour of the center brace here. Now that is only a slight radius, only because of how small and thin the piece is, but I now then have to find the radius on my bracing here, which I did the same exact way with a washer and a pencil. And I've marked the one because there is some flex in my back that I will have to clamp down in place. Again, it didn't spring back as much as I had thought it would, much like the sides did when I took those out of the mold, which is fine. I'll just have to use the clamping pressure to put it fully into place. But that means that I have to be pretty close with my bracing radius here to make sure that it isn't glued in a much wider radius. So to do that, all I've done is I've taken it and I've kind of flexed it back a little bit to get it closer to the radius it's supposed to be. And then I took that washer and I marked out that radius from there. Now, as you recall, unlike your traditional acoustic guitars, this has a post going through the center of it. So I do have to take all of that into account with the heights and everything that I am going for on my bracing here so that I am not running into that post, and I want that post to glide right over top of it, leaving a gap so that it still resonates like an acoustic. With that, I'm going to go cut out these bracing here. We're going to then mark where they cross over this center brace here, and I'm going to cut those out, and then realistically we can just glue it all in place. Alright, so now that we got it this far, let's glue on the other bracing. Alright, now with the upward pressure of that, that's going to help hold those in place, and that's going to let it dry, and you can see there's some nice tension on these ends too. So now we're just going to let this dry and then I can shape them down. So I went ahead and I had a bit of a play off camera here. I added some veneer to this, which has taken my cut here and made it a nice tight pocket. Took a little bit of tweaking, but what I'm going to do is, because I want to mount this with magnets like I have done in my previous builds, we are going to add these 4 blocks here that are going to act as the retainer for the magnets. So it doesn't need to be much. These are about 18 millimeters or a little over half an inch, and we're going to glue them in, sticking out about halfway. I don't need a significant amount for the magnets as they're only 4 millimeters. So I'm just going to go ahead, glue these in, and then those should act very well as a backer for this piece. And then I can add the magnets on the opposing side, and this will hold in beautifully. You ever set up your camera and get moving with an operation only to realize that it wasn't recording? Yeah, me either. Here's where we stand right now. I have gone ahead and laminated a binding around my control cavity cover, and I've also gone ahead and sunk in the magnet pieces to hold this in place. Now I'm going to do a little bit of fine sanding on it because it is a little tight right now, but I'm going to wait until I get this mounted onto the body first before I do that. But before I do anything of that gluing up, I need to figure out my sound holes, because these 2 ports here at the end are not going to be enough of a sound hole for this whole thing, and it's going to be only one direction, which is out toward the neck. So I came up with a solution, and that is to to make this design here, which I have already gone ahead and bored out. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to drop fill it with some gold powder. And then once that gold powder has set, I'm going to go ahead and cut out some of these corner pieces here. So I think I'm just going to do these 4 and maybe the center strip right here in the middle. But before I can do any of that, I'm going to switch over to some of the Star Bond and drop fill some gold in this. I'm going to give that a little bit to completely cure. I'm going to buff it back, and then I'm going to cut out those spots. And just like that, this is what I'm talking about. Drop fill with the gold. And then we've got our sound holes here too. Now, this obviously still needs some final sanding, but I can do all of that once I get everything all glued together. So, first what I'm going to do, we can finally glue the back on. Alright, now that we've got that glued together and it's in one piece, I'm going to let that dry and we'll move on to the next operation. But I think that's going to be all for this episode. The next one, we need to focus on getting some frets in here. We'll need to final shape the body, we'll need to sand it down, and we'll need to be doing some finishing work in order to get this done in time, because as it stands right now, I've only got a few weeks left. With that said, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow along as I finish this harebrained idea that I had for my great guitar build-off entry. As always, we'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned.